Okay, in nearly every interview I've been able to find of today's guest, the interviewer has said in a preamble like this, something to the effect of, today's guest is really hard to describe. I promised myself I wasn't going to do that, but here we are, and I have to describe her, and oh my god. Okay, let's start with the big one. Today's guest is a porn star. She's one of the top grossing models on OnlyFans, or was until a couple weeks ago. She decided to quit because she just got bored. She was also a webcam girl for years and years, and there's a huge pornographic presence on her on the internet. But also, she has a huge footprint in the rationalist community, and she has an intellectual blog called Knowing Less, which is a fascinating and bizarre little corner of the internet where I recommend you spend lots and lots of time because it's crazy. Today, I talked to Aella about 2 trips that she's been on. The first is absolutely wild, but fairly ordinary and expected from the perspective of baggage claim. She was invited on OKCupid by a complete stranger to a party in a castle in France. And she said yes. She got on a plane, flew to France, and found herself falling in love in a castle. She then gallivanted around Europe with the person she fell in love with, over to Turkey, time in South Africa, all sorts of absolutely wild stuff. But then there's a second story. Second story is unusual for baggage claim. It's unusual for the world. When she was 22 years old, Aella took acid once a week for 10 months. Her stories are absolutely wild, completely unique, and completely unexpected and unlike anything I've ever heard. Aella is a fascinating human being, and she shows up to this conversation with no perceivable fear of shame or fear of judgment. But I do recommend you come into this conversation with a serious desire to listen and be open-minded. Some of what Aella has to say is controversial and unique and definitely requires an open mind. But if you do, I have a feeling you're going to have a pretty wild experience and change the way you think about a few things. I know I certainly did. 2 bits of housekeeping before we start today. The first is that this is the first conversation that you'll hear on Baggage Claim that also has the visual component available here on YouTube. That's awesome, but I also sucked at this when I recorded this, so there's a little bit of a lag in moments. I left the visual in because it doesn't impact the audio. If you don't want to watch the visual, you don't have to, but there are some moments that the visual gets pretty bad. I apologize in advance. The second is that this conversation was recorded a couple of weeks ago, so the events in Colombia hadn't yet transpired in quite that way. This is relevant because in the middle of the conversation, I talk about Colombia and just completely skip over that. It's worth noting that those events just hadn't taken place at the time of this recording. I have some links available in the description below. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, that's totally fine. Anyway, let's get to it. This is Baggage Claim, travel stories no one tells. I'm Will Conway. If you're enjoying Baggage Claim, subscribe. Mash the button, hit the bell, do the thing. This and every other interview comes with bonus questions. More fun conversation that's not in today's episode. Text MEMBER to 332-877-9540 or go to heybagageclaim.com/support. Let's get to it. Okay, so first question for you. Are people still on OKCupid? Is this website still a thing?
Yeah, I think so. I got booted off of it for unknown reasons. So I haven't been on it recently, but last I was, people were still using it.
Huh. OKCupid in my brain is one of those like plenty of fish match.com era things that just fell away at the advent of like Tinder and Bumble and all that. But if it's still,
It's the best one in my opinion. I've met multiple partners. I've been using it for like 10 years now. I was
yeah,
on there since the early days, and the match system that they have is like one of the best ways to find a person who's actually compatible with you that really has existed on dating apps. And I'm really sad that it's gone to such shit.
yeah. So I was gonna ask you about that. What is the advantage of OKCupid? Because obviously you are on all sorts of platforms that or less uh, PG-13 and below?
But I used it to find partners, and the thing is, they ask you questions, and then you answer the questions, like, and then you can like decide the kind of answer that you want your
Oh,
partner to have.
interesting.
Like, if somebody else like really likes Trump, you could be like, I this is strong preference against that,
For sure.
and then it would like remove it would reflect on the match
Mm.
percentage. So if you have like a really high percentage match with them, and it means that they agree with you, like there's no deal breakers yet that the system has found. Which is cool, and I've successfully like messaged all my 99% matches and dated a lot of them.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I mean, I guess I didn't mean to open with an OKCupid ad, but it sounds like pretty cool. Pretty cool
Well, no.
platform.
So one, they booted me for no reason. I mean, I think just because I was open about the fact I was a sex worker on my
Yeah.
profile. Maybe I don't even know if I was. I don't remember. And then they were like, oh, sex workers, we can't have those. So they removed me. I'm very not pleased about it because I was on there for like 10 years. I was a mod. You could be like a volunteer mod on there.
Yeah.
I've I've been promoting OkCupid for years, and it's like, oh, really, you want to take me off the platform? That's not right. So I don't know. I don't know if I can really recommend it anymore.
So you're on OKCupid. The year is 2015. You get this message about a party in France. Tell what the message say. Like, tell me the thing.
Yeah, I got a message. It was a really long message. It was the first message I'd gotten from this person who I'd never seen before. It's a high, like 95% match or something with him. And it was just like, hey, I'm throwing a party in France. I'm inviting some people I know. The castle is located here. It's like a castle I know from a friend. If you want to get to it, you can there's like a bunch of options for transportation, and here's the dates, and like here's what to bring. I hope you come. That was the invitation. And so I responded. I think I responded like with some basic logistical information. I was like, okay, like which so I have something about like which car is like good to do, and then he like responded with an answer, and then I was like, okay, I'll be there, and that was it.
Okay, so for context, this is a party that you got invited to from a stranger in France.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was in France at the time, and it was a detailed party invite. Like it sounded like
Yeah.
he had like thought of the logistics, and I was like, okay, would I rather live a life where I don't go to this party or a life where I do? So, but I decided to try it because I was like, fuck it, right? Like, if I'm probably not gonna get murdered. That was the thing. I was like, it seems unlikely that he would murder me. It's like a weird kind of thing to do. But I was part of the rationalist community like quite heavily in Seattle
Yeah.
at the time, and I found out later they were like taking bets out on whether or not I was gonna get murdered. They were all telling me like, you shouldn't do this. It's a terrible idea. But I went and I did not die.
So you surmised your survival rate was high enough to go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was the invite? What was compelling about it?
I don't remember. I wish I could find it again. Well, it was just castle in France, bunch of like random people who like, seemed cool. I don't remember what information was in it specifically, but the guy who invited me had been traveling around the world for years and like to festivals, and so he's like, I'm inviting like just random cool people that I've met. So I'm like, okay, this is like a group of people who like don't really know each other, I guess.
Yeah.
That was under the impression, and they're all like coming together for a few weeks, and like that sounds like it could potentially be really awesome.
Yeah.
And I was like very adventure prone. I mean, I still am, but I was a lot more at the time.
Yeah.
I was like, this sounds like an opportunity that I shouldn't like it could be a lot. It could be like really great experience, and I don't want to miss it.
Yeah, I like the way you framed it maybe a minute or so ago, which was, do I want to live the kind of life where I jump on opportunities like this? That's kind of a beautiful framework to operate from.
Yeah, I often think about it as I imagine that my life right now is like the memory that I'm really like on my deathbed, and I'm like doing the life flashback thing where I'm going through all of it, and I try and be like, okay, if I am living through the flashback, like what do I wish I would have done? And so I try and do that thing.
Hey there, Will Conway here. All right, so this conversation, I love it with you. It gets kind of trippy and kind of weird. But there's one segment, one piece of the conversation I chose not to include. And for that piece, you have to be a member. In that segment of the conversation, Aella takes LSD into an airport in Saudi Arabia. I advise against that. So does she, to be honest with you. Anyway, if you want access to that segment and secret unreleased segments from every other episode of Baggage Claim, as well as essays, more blog posts, and unreleased full story episodes of the immersive part of Baggage Claim, you're going to have to go to heybagageclaim.com/support. I can make it easy for you, though. If you're in the US or Canada, text MEMBER to 332-877-9540. And it'll be fun. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Anyway, enjoy the interview. See you out there. I don't want to say that, you get to a certain point where it's hard to take in ridiculous beliefs, but I do have this hunch that life is a memory, as opposed to like the entire thing is sort of rewatching the movie, as opposed, because there's no, well, we can get into determinism later because I have all sorts of questions for you on that, but I don't really, at the core of it, there doesn't feel to me to be a central decision maker who's saying like, yes, let's do this thing. No, let's not. I sort of feel like I'm in the back, like eating popcorn and watching a movie.
Yeah, I feel you on that.
Yeah. All right. So you go to the party. What did you just get on, just like fly American Airlines across the pond and go to this thing? Like what happened?
Yeah, basically. I flew to Paris and I had to figure out how to get there from Paris because it's like I took a train for a while, but then I had to do this ride sharing service, which was hard because I don't speak French very much, but I managed to get dropped off at the side of the road, and then I texted the person who was at this thing, and so they drove like 15 minutes from the castle to come pick me up off the highway. Yeah, it was really surreal and strange just being in a car with strangers. I hadn't slept in a while because of the flight.
Yeah, so it's a castle. Can you tell me about the castle? Like what kind of castle are we talking about?
Yeah, no heating, no internal heating.
Yeah, it's a castle.
And it was in winter. I went in December, and so it was very cold. And there was like a bunch of people there that he had met. So this guy, should I say his name? No, okay, I'm not gonna say his name.
Yeah, skip the names.
Let's call him Bob. So Bob had like been traveling for a long time, and met all these people, and so invited them. So I found like a bunch of like random Europeans from different countries were there, like some Germans, like French people, English, and we hung out for a while. Anyway, I went for 2 weeks, and the group like slowly whittled down to this core group of like 5 or 6 people who were there, and we mostly spent the time like by the giant fireplace, building fire, and talking about our lives. It felt like one of those like stupid movies that wins a lot of awards, like a Richard Linklater film, where everybody's like, it kind of like felt like that from the inside, like a very magical sort of like casually talking about life and philosophy and their experiences. And we were all young, so it was younger, so a bit silly. But then over the period of time, Bob and I ended up falling for each other pretty hard.
Oh, so all right, I knew we were getting to a boy eventually. The person who originally invited you was the guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you've told me in a prior conversation that you tend, and feel free to, I'm paraphrasing you, so feel free to correct me on this, but you tend not to be, you're more analytical minds, you tend not to be the most outgoing person.
Yeah, this is true.
Getting on an airplane and going to France and getting swept off your feet by this guy doesn't sound like the behavior of an analytically minded, internal focused human.
Yeah, I am very analytically minded and internally focused, and also very risk tolerant. This is not the first time I had gotten on a plane to go meet a stranger, and probably it's not going to be the last time that I do that. It's sort of like I feel sort of either insensitive or resilient, depending on how you want to frame it. to the thought of bad things happening to me, I sort of don't really feel like I mind it very much. And so for me, it feels a little bit rational, I guess, to really go take those risks, because I can handle when things go wrong.
Yeah, I think the first place I came across that mindset, which feels in some ways radically different, but in other ways I definitely can connect to it and relate to it at some level, just from a risk tolerance standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
But you posted this missive about Me Too, I think in 2018 when it was coming out, which is where I first noticed that you had a background in travel, or a background in travel, had spent time traveling, um, and sort of talking through that as Me Too is happening, you were recognizing these. Oh yeah, I have an experience actually that looks a little bit like that, or something happened to me that definitely is aligned with the way this person is telling their own story. But I don't. You didn't seem to have flagged it in quite the same way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is true. I don't think I don't know why. I don't know if this is like
Yeah.
genetic or based on like my upbringing. But like for example, recently this happened. I was an escort, like a prostitute, and I had a traumatic experience. I say traumatic. It wasn't actually that traumatic. I had what should have been a traumatic experience with a client in a hotel where he like physically abused me and like said some
Mm.
really scary things, and I was afraid for my life. And I was like, okay, is this gonna like after I remember like walking out of the hotel like, is this gonna is this gonna fuck me up or something? Like what am I gonna be like have like emotional baggage around this now? And it turns out like I kind of don't. Like I don't feel afraid of. I still kept escorting after that, and it was fine. And
Yeah.
so I don't know. I feel like I don't know if this I'm like I said insensitive or if I'm just better calibrated to risk. Like when I took the risk, I guess, to fly to France and meet a bunch of strangers. For me, it was pretty rational. I was afraid. I felt like very physically terrified. It was a really adrenaline-inducing
Yeah.
thing to buy that plane ticket. But I was like, okay, what are the actual chances of murder? Like, how many people get murdered? Like, it probably like 1 in 10,000, the chance. And I was like, okay, that's the chance I'm willing to take. I take 1 in 10,000 risks all the time, like driving a car. So it feels like almost like a rational override of the risk. And then when something bad happens to me, often it feels a little bit like a rational override. Like, okay, something scary happened, but am I fine? I'm physically intact. Nothing scary is here. And so that sort of is very calming for me.
Yeah. We can go into this now or later. I'm trying to decide. You spent a year or more pretty consistently taking LSD once a week. Is that
Yeah.
about right?
On average, once a
Yeah.
week, sometimes sooner, sometimes later, for about 10 months. Yeah.
I've seen in various places that you've potentially associated some of that, however you want to frame it, potential disconnection or um, rational
Resilience.
override to that time. Do you notice a behavioral difference in yourself before and after that experience? I know you do in
Um,
other places, but on this specifically.
uh, do I do it in other places? So I'm not actually sure. So I think it's a little bit like kind of complicated, like not easy to
Yeah.
wrap up in a narrative. I think even before I did LSD, I was still unusually resilient due to rational override. Rational override doesn't even sound right because it sounds like I'm like actually suppressing something that was there, but I feel like I was actually genuinely calming something that was there. It was like a
Yeah.
rational like readjustment. But there were some things that I was not that I had trauma around, and so like doing LSD like helped me like figure out how to do that for the actual traumas that I held at that point. And then you said, was your question, are there any other things? Can you rephrase?
No, it was more just I know and have read in various places you've described at length some of the behavioral pieces that took place for you at the time, and what you think might potentially be long-term effects, things like memory,
Mm.
etc.
Yeah, I have memory problems, I think. But
um,
I mean, the long-term effects are largely positive. The
yeah,
only negative one I think is possibly decreased memory capacity. But all the
sure.
rest are better. Like I feel like pretty great all the time, even if I don't, you know?
Yeah. Short term specifically, or you have trouble remembering the details of that thing that happened 10 years ago?
I don't feel like my really long-term memory is affected, but like I might not remember what happened last week very well, or if we had a call, like I often like don't remember people's names, or like sometimes if I've done podcasts with them before, and I'm like that seems like something other people would remember, stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. And that's fair, but you know, you end up on the. There are also some details where I I don't know. I forget what I had for breakfast half mornings. Like,
Yeah,
but it's 4:20. I have no idea what I had for breakfast this morning. I think it was
really.
eggs. I think it was eggs, but that might have been yesterday.
Okay, yeah, okay, yeah, it might be your.
I might have a similar problem. All right, so we get to France. We're around a campfire or around a fire in a castle, and there's this guy.
Yeah.
What drew you in?
It's so interesting. I've never had anybody ask about this specific thing before. So I'm
Yeah,
used to talking like about I've told the story a million times for a bunch of other stuff. And this is like the first time that I'm trying to figure out how to tell it.
yeah.
So
No, that's, by the way, one of my favorite things about this show is I very frequently find myself taking people who have like a canned on message communication
Mhm.
and get them into talking about a thing that isn't, not because I'm particularly good at interviewing, but because they always travel as kind of like a building block of the thing. It's never the core story. Uh,
Mhm.
anyway, it's just been a fun piece. So
It was
anyway,
very impressive.
take me through it. What'd you feel for this guy?
In the beginning, he was very pickup artisty. I had studied a lot of pickup artistry because once I ended up in bed with a guy and I was like, how did you do that? And he gave me a book. So I started reading about how people seduce women, and he was doing a lot of that stuff. And I don't think he'd studied it. I think it was pretty organic for him. And so I felt really wary of him at first. Like this guy's he's doing like Kino where like he'll touch you and like put a lot of attention on you and then sort of like take it away and act like you don't exist. So it was like very like push and pull, you know, like
Sure.
he's like obviously unafraid of you like as a woman. Like, he doesn't give a shit. Like he's not like trying to get you to like him, you know, like it feels like he's acting like he could have sex with you at any time and he's like kind of choosing not to. And so consciously I was like, he's doing a thing and I know it. And I'm like wary and I have defenses, but like I find that often with stuff like that, I think that I'm being wary. I think I'm having defenses, but I really don't. And that like when the time comes where they're like, "Hey, do you want to have sex?" I notice that I do, and so that sort of thing happened. At some point, I was like, "Gotta watch out for this guy." And then we ended up alone, and then he initiated, and I was like, I guess I'm not gonna just say no to this." Which is how it works, right? Like this is why pickup artistry works, like even if you know how it does.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had sex and then it was like a bit of a confusing time because he'd come with another girl. We were all poly, and it's the worst part of polyamory is like the beginning of relationships where you're not sure where you stand,
Mm,
and you're not sure if like you should talk about where you stand because like is this a casual thing, and it's like feels weird to make it serious so fast because in order to like have communication about it. So we had this classic problem where he'd come with another girl and she got jealous, and then a third girl came and he started having sex with her, and then like me and his like other girl were like talking like ganging up on him. It was this whole little drama, but anyway it ended up calming down, and then the last few days, week or so, was very, we all sort of bonded really well. And I remember when I finally left that I like fell in love with all of them. And remember we like drove to the train station at like 4 a.m. and we were all piled in the back seat because we didn't want one of us to sit in the front seat. We all wanted to be
oh,
like touching. So we like just like 4 or 5 of us were like just on top of each other. And then I remember I got in the train, and then when it went away, they were all like running with the train, like waving at me. And I like cried. It
full.
was a really good experience. Well, like one of the best in my life, really. And then he and I just did calls for a while all the time. I moved back to Seattle, and then we decided we wanted to travel together basically immediately. We made plans to go to Turkey in about a month, but we couldn't wait that long to see each other. So he flew to Seattle and then stayed with me for a few weeks before I went to Turkey.
Why Turkey?
Neither of us had been before, and that was it. I don't know. He was like, I don't know, I heard Turkey's cool. And I was like, all right, sure.
What so how long after the castle in France and the cliche World War II running after the train moment were how long from that day until you were in Turkey?
About a month, maybe 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And I packed up everything and left my apartment, sold it all.
With the intention of vagabonding through Turkey, or just
Didn't want to be tied down, so I was like, all right, I'm going to travel indefinitely now. I was pretty bad at it because I was a cam girl, and I had never like traveled in that way before. I had traveled before, but like, I have an apartment at home, right? And I bring a suitcase, then I return. And so I had never like actually lived with all of my belongings with me. And so I brought like too much for a while, and I slowly over the months like figured out like, oh, I'm going to shed all of this. And then I ended up with just one backpack.
yeah, I'll say I went the opposite direction. I had a 30-liter Deuter bag my entire time, which
Wow.
is tiny, like tiny. And yeah, I had come from like apartment in Williamsburg, all the stuff. I mean, I still had a storage unit for a couch and some things, but I didn't even have my own storage unit. I just shoved a couch in my friend's storage unit. Is basically what happened. But yeah, I kind of went the opposite direction. I had 2 pairs of shoes, 1 button down just in case like I had to look presentable at some point, and then just the rest was like underwear and
Wow.
t-shirts.
You
Yeah.
really went all out there.
But yeah. All right, so you go to Target with too much stuff.
Yeah.
What was it? First of all, was it just you and him, or were the other ladies there as well?
We had one friend with us,
Yeah.
who was fantastic. Was younger than us. Like I think she's like 20 at the time, and just super weird human, which I deeply appreciate. Just like taught herself ancient Greek just because had a very odd style
Like
of
the
dress.
language.
Yeah. So we would go to like ruins together in Turkey, and she would like read stuff off the stones. Yeah, she was great. Very, very bookish in a bizarre way. Very strange. Like in ways that I would get into, but I want to respect your privacy. But yeah, so we lived together in an Airbnb.
Sounds like Bob has a type, by the way.
He wasn't with her. They were not romantically involved. But yeah, the weird girls he attracted a lot. And I met a lot of like really, I would say like this is my the longest benefit I got out of this relationship was the people he introduced me to. He's extremely good at like locating like the cool people, like the people who are like really unusual and special in a way that we value in a crowd. So he really brought a lot of people into my life. Yeah, so I lived with that girl and Bob. And I was a cam girl there, which felt a little weird to be in like such a Muslim type area where I was like fucking myself on camera. It was really also hard to maintain a regular cam schedule because of the time zone, and I was busy not wanting to work. I was burning out a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. We just kind of hung out. There's not like really exciting stories. I did get followed home and almost aggressed upon once.
Yeah.
In Turkey. I went out dancing in Istanbul like at 2 a.m. I decided to walk home. And I was walking down to the Istiklal Street, the big main one. And I realized slowly that there were no other women on the street. It was only men walking. And I was like, oh, that makes me feel really uncomfortable. None of that makes me feel uncomfortable. I'm like, probably things are safe. People don't get murdered. But not seeing any other women outside made me really the danger alarms. And I was right. I ended up having a guy chase me down the winding side streets where nobody else was there for me to call for help. And then I ended up like screaming. We have security footage. It was very dramatic. Right before when I got to my door, because it was in the dead end alley, was where I was staying. And so I ran around the corner and I turned around and he was like lunging at me and I just lost my shit, started screaming and I shook. I dropped my keys on the ground like a baby. And I screamed loud enough that he ran away. That was very scary. That was the most exciting thing that happened to me when I was in Turkey. But it turned out fine.
Your resilience is coming through in a way that I find really interesting. So just, it's a terrifying experience, and everything was fine. No big deal. It was sort of the key takeaway from Ella's perspective.
I guess it turns out that like you can just scream and people are scared of that.
Yeah. Did you, so one thing I noticed, especially so I spent a lot of time in South America, and I guess it's more just a tip for listeners, was one thing I found to be a good indicator of whether or not a street was safe was obviously, families with babies and strollers. Obviously, these are women on a street. Those types of things are going to reflect positively. But, if it's late at night, you're coming home from a bar or a club or something. One thing that I actually noticed to be a powerful indicator of street safety was dogs. So Colombia and South America has, a lot of feral dogs, and they kind of know what's up, was my experience. Like the places where there tend to be shootings and aggressive behavior, they don't spend time. And so if I was walking down the street and there were 3 or 4 feral dogs kind of strolling by or doing their thing, I tended to feel really safe. Yeah.
That's interesting.
I don't know if data reflects that, but that was my experience.
I actually had the opposite experience that very night when I was walking home and I got the guy right before that happened. I was aggressed upon by dogs and I had to climb on top of a car to escape from them. So when you said like dogs were an indicator, I'm like, you mean that the things are bad?
Oh wow, that's so fascinating. We came to completely opposite conclusions.
Yeah. It might just be different parts of the world. Like Istanbul's not generally like a shooty uppy kind of place, and I've never been to South America.
Yeah, I mean, I guess South America is a kind of shooty uppy kind of place, but my experience wasn't. I didn't get shotty uppy, so everything has turned out fine.
Turned out fine.
I did have a few moments. There's this one episode of my podcast, which is me. I was in a city I shouldn't have been in. It's called Buenaventura in Colombia, and Buenaventura is sort of oddly positioned in Colombia to be sort of regressively dangerous, because it's on the Pacific coast of Colombia. So if you on the far side of Panama, right, like on the west side of Panama, pretty far south. It's about 2 hours west of Cali, Colombia. And it sort of has an odd confluence of events that take place. So one is it's right on the edge of the jungle. So FARC and the paramilitary groups are still very much at war there, which is untrue for most of the rest of the country. And then Buenaventura is sort of over a mountain range and removed from the rest of the country. And so the result is that it's just kind of an out of sight, out of mind effect. So they haven't had a new high school built in like 45 years, something like that. And it's a city of, I'm forgetting now, but a city that would rival Boston type just in terms of population. And then simultaneously, it's the largest port on the Pacific coast. So the cartels have a huge just business interest in the city. So all this confluence of events, this confluence of realities results in Buenaventura being light speed more dangerous than the rest of Colombia, which is Colombia now. Coronavirus may have had an impact on safety, but Colombia can be dangerous if you put yourself in the wrong position. But Colombia is very travelable, can be very, very safe. The big cities have safety levels and sort of homicide rates on par with various places in the US. It's not terribly dangerous, but Buenaventura's murder rate is, depends who you ask, but somewhere between 130 and 150 per 100,000, which for context, New York City is like 3. And like a bad city in the US is like Camden is like 20, 25. So it's like wartime Baghdad level dangerous.
Wow.
It's passed through because I went whale watching, just the stupidest
You
reason in
ended
the
up
world.
there.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was one of those, I stepped outside the bus terminal and smoked a cigarette, and cars were slowing down to look at me. I was just, my existence there was, and not in a curious way. There was clearly seedy intention behind it. So I'm setting this all up to say that I was standing outside smoking the cigarette, getting in my head about how dangerous it was, and had just come from whale watching where a guy from Cali told me how terribly dangerous, but everything I just said, he had communicated to me prior to this experience. So I step outside, and I hear over my shoulder in perfect English, somebody says like, "Hey, you're not from here," or something to that effect. I turn around, there's this, petite, late 40s, early 50s woman, friendly face. And this had happened to me other times in Colombia. There'd sort of been like a motherly figure who's like, "You stupid white boy, like don't be doing what you're doing because that's dangerous." And I thought I was going to get a talking to like that. And she sort of put on this real estate broker, like sales pitch, like fun mom energy. And she was like, "So like, what brings you to Buenaventura? Like, why are you here?" And started asking increasingly invasive questions. Got down to like, she asked like where I'm from, and that's fine. And it's like, "Oh, I come from the US. I lived in New York before this, blah, blah, blah." But then as it went on, she started asking like, you're at the bus terminal, where are you going? What's your bus number? And various things. And the alarm bells started going off. And it's funny I'm telling this story because the name of the episode is Purple Shirt, and I was wearing this shirt at the time.
Wow.
And so the reason for that is I started getting cagey. I started like kind of not answering her questions. And she claimed that her and her brother had this tour company, and if I'd like to get to know her city better, I should come with her, and her brother could show me around. Absolutely not. Thank you very much. No, no, no. Get me the fuck out of here was kind of the energy I started giving off. Her eyes went dead cold. She pulled her phone from her pocket and said like, "I'm calling my brother." And then in English, for some reason, said, "His name is Will. He's wearing a purple shirt. He's from New York City." And she just hung up and walked away. And I'm just standing in Buenaventura,
That's
confused.
uncomfortable.
Yeah. So my solution was to hide in the bus terminal bathroom for 6 hours before my bus. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, it's a reasonable action to take. Jeez.
Yeah. Yeah. And like a guy came into the bathroom. I like spent too long for my brain's liking at the sink. So it was like, "Oh, he's 100% about to kidnap me or murder me or whatever." And then there are police officers around, but this is Colombia, sketchy city. Maybe then you start to think those types of thoughts. Maybe those people are in on it, or this is some sort of, and then you think like, "Oh, I shouldn't be thinking that. That's really offensive." You're like, "No, no, no, save yourself, idiot." you know? So that happened.
Wow.
I ended up on the
6
bed.
hours of paranoia must have been awful. Do you have like lasting
Crazy.
damage from that?
No. I have bits and pieces of your thing. And that was just a cool episode of a podcast.
Congrats.
Yeah, like from my perspective, it just made for an awesome story. But at the
Mm,
time, fucking terrified. But then I woke up the next
yeah.
morning on a bus, coming into Medellin, beautiful mountains, sun rising. I felt unbelievably alive. Um, so
Mm.
anyway, those moments can have beauty wrapped around the corner. So, all right, we're in Turkey. Sorry for taking over your interview with the
No, it's great.
monologue.
It was a great story.
How so you communicated to me before that some of the reasons you end up feeling really strongly for a person can also potentially be some of the reasons that it ends up not being sustainable in the long term.
Mm, that
What
is true.
yeah, what started to happen with this guy?
Um, yeah,
Bob.
we've fell in love because I think we felt like with each other we felt not alone in a way that nobody else had been able to make us feel not alone,
Mm,
um, which was great, and I value that and I don't regret it. He also had like certain ways of approaching life that ended up like being kind of damaging. Like we had like sex problems, as in he wasn't really sexually attracted to me, which was pretty
mm,
painful to feel that. And I had like I for a while it really damaged my sense of sexual value. I was like, oh, I'm just an unattractive person. That's why. That's like the only reason why you wouldn't want to have sex with me, even though like it wasn't the only, like there was like other stuff going on, but that's the effect that it had. Especially because we were poly, and I was watching him have sex with other people all the time, basically. So it's like I just like watched him like bring girls home to like the place that we both lived in, and they're like, all right, that's happening, and I'm not part of that, and so it was pretty painful. And then also just he didn't have a type of empathy that I sort of wanted, to like the extent that I wanted. He wasn't able to fulfill me in that way. So at one point, he like went traveling without me, and then like while he was gone, I was like sent him a message like maybe we should just not continue this, but it was already on the way out for a while, and so we stopped. We're still friends. We still have seen each other over the years, now and then, but I think we're much better not as romantic partnership.
yeah, you led me down a couple of mental rabbit holes there. The first is sort of a question about taking and receiving feedback and how it impacts your ego, your psyche. So obviously, given your line of work, I imagine you receive probably some negative, but a fair amount of positive reinforcement about you being attractive and your sexual value. Did and that probably, I don't know what the numbers are, but I probably imagine that becomes like 1,000 to 1 positive to negative.
Yeah, it is online though, which feels different. Like
Yeah.
it's very easy to sort of reinterpret it. It's like, well, of course you think I'm hot. Like this is you're watching me from a screen with the perfect lighting that I constructed with the perfect clothing. Sometimes, maybe it's like a little bit of Photoshop, although I didn't really do Photoshop. Most of it was live. But still, it was like, okay, these people like aren't really seeing me for what I actually look like. Like I have a lot of makeup on, and you can't tell because the lighting is grainy. So it felt very convincing. I was like, well, if they saw me in person, they wouldn't find me attractive. So I felt very unattractive, and for a long time it was really hard. But it fixed itself once I started escorting. So I had like deep, like I'm the hideous woman, and then I started escorting, and I successfully was getting men to pay me like quite a lot of money, often repeatedly, to have sex with me. It's like, okay, all right, that's proof. I can't reason myself. This is not like filtered through a screen. Like they are seeing me exactly the way I am, and they like it. So I'm in. So and after that,
Yeah.
I haven't really had much of a problem.
Yeah, I'm hot to the tune of X dollars. Probably carries some. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, do you So the reason I asked that is I've begun to experience this with the podcast for a long time. Like nobody was listening, and then it got to the point where enough people are listening that I receive feedback, and that feedback probably goes 20 to 1 really positive, and I don't hear the positive. I
Mm,
claim to hear it, and I'm really excited in the moment, but in terms of building up my long-term ego, just no long-term effects from positive reinforcement. And negative reinforcement, especially if it's somebody I know, is like that episode, meh, just to my straight to my soul permanently.
what kind of negative feedback do you get?
Well, um, so I had a particularly odd interaction last night, 2 nights ago, which was that I put out the first of what are sort of the climactic, like my artistic, everything I have artistically kind of going into these 2 episodes, which is me reconstructing. By the time this interview comes out, these will have been out for a little while, but it's me reconstructing 2 consecutive ayahuasca trips in the Amazon rainforest. And so it's really intensely sound designed. It's very intentional in the communication. And there was a guy I had met about 2 weeks after that happened in real life, um, who I met in Lima, Peru. And we traveled together for a little while, kind of like got awkward towards the end. We had a little bit of a falling out. And I had just come from what for me was this life affirming, life changing sort of spiritual unpacking, and was talking up ayahuasca essentially incessantly and just full evangelist mode. And he had a really really bad experience. He took ayahuasca on my recommendation and
Mm.
did not have a similar experience. And I apparently visually, some incarnation of me was a big part of his ayahuasca experience. And we haven't talked since then. I didn't know this. So I put out the first of my 2 ayahuasca experiences, which is a negative landscape and not a hellish landscape. Very often those things can go to a dark place, as you well know. And this was like teetering on the edge of the abyss, but wasn't there. And he sent me maybe 30 consecutive voice memos on Instagram, just really, really negative, about me doing this, about me putting out into the world, about what he saw as sort of an attempt to use an internal experience to promote myself. Sort of this type of conversation, which wasn't. It just felt nowhere near close to what my intentions were. And also I saw his reality. So yeah, uh, that was one of the harder conversations I've had in a while. But then that, more common is just like that episode didn't fuck with me, or some version of that, and when each one of these episodes, 8-10,000 word short story that I've refined, and then I self-taught voice acting, design, like no part of it's done by another person, right? So anytime something negative comes in, or somebody's like, yeah, it, I don't know, just burns more than like a 6-paragraph, oh my god, because same episode, bunch of people who had done ayahuasca were like, oh, this took me back to this experience. Oh my god, I've never done ayahuasca. This made me really intrigued by what it could be. Yeah, so that you get all this positive, and then one
Yeah,
asshole I met in Peru.
that one that you described feels like it hits like a couple of the key points of negative feedback that's powerful, like not in a great way, which is like they have to know you. So somebody who's like personally connected to your life, somebody who has plausibly like a valid complaint with you, like plausibly you did negatively affect them in some way. And 3, they provide like some sort of reframing of your intention that is also plausible. Like,
Yeah.
oh, you're putting this thing out here, you want attention, you don't want to help people.
Yeah.
And something that like you can really actually doubt yourself. You're like, holy, am I like, is this, you know? And so it sounds like that person hit like the triple whammy for you. That sounds really hard.
He did. But yeah, even much more mild feedback can hit pretty hard. Is he also was present in my life for what in the story I'm telling is the moment when I like came into being my own, and he was like, "You're an asshole," then in that exact moment, you know.
Wow.
So that, yeah, that was
That's
rough.
I kind of like I want to like have like space of compassion for the pain of that, but also
No, go
it's
for it.
kind of like cool to like be the thing, like the moment, like the pinnacle, and to have somebody be like asshole. There's something like kind of like really aesthetic about that.
Yeah. Remember that time, like obviously I didn't climb Mount Everest, but on the top of Mount Everest, you were like such a dick to me. You were like, you just ruined me summiting Mount Everest.
Yeah.
Hey there, Will Conway here. Hey, fourth shirt of this episode. This one took a while. Anyway, if you're enjoying it, I'd love for you to become a member. You'll get bonus content from this and every other episode of Baggage Claim. You'll notice I'm not trying to sell you Dockers or Allbirds or whatever the other podcasts are trying to sell you. But if you're enjoying it, becoming a member would mean the world to me. To do so, text member to 332-877-9540 or go to heybagageclaim.com/support. All that information is in the description below. Thanks. Enjoy. I want to go back to something we touched on earlier and didn't dive fully into. What are your views on determinism?
I think it's an illusion, and I mean, it also depends like what you mean by free will. Like a lot of people have very different concepts when they are thinking about that word. A lot of people refer to free will as something that some people have more or less of, like, oh, if you go to jail, you have less free will. And so what they mean by free will is like options available to you.
Sure.
And so if you have fewer options, you have less free will. And other people mean something like the sense of choice that you have somewhere in, like here. Like when I choose to, like when I lift my hand and lower it, like the sense that there's a control of it in some way. But it doesn't, I don't think it's like a thing, you know?
Yeah. Have you spent, well, obviously you've spent a fair amount of time on LSD, but have you spent a fair amount of time meditating? Has that been part of your life?
Not on LSD.
You've meditated while on LSD.
Yeah. I mean, that's what people, that's what
Yeah,
you do on
but
it, right?
I mean deliberately.
Yeah.
Just sort of interesting.
I think that was like how I spent most of it.
Yeah. The reason I say this is that I've found at the core of that experience that there's nothing there. There's just a complete absence of some central thesis, right? There's observation and basically nothing else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the sense of free will sort of transformed to being object. Like how in meditation, a lot of things, like you take a thing, you look at it, and you realize that it becomes object to you. Like you realize that you are witnessing it. And so sort of this movement from something being like around you in the water to being like part of something that you consider part of your identity, to like realizing that you are not that thing.
Right.
Sort of feels kind of like what happened with free will. Like free will became like a sensation, like feeling a pinch of skin, or like looking at the color red. I'm like, oh, there's a little bit of like free will juice that I'm like experiencing, but it doesn't feel like it is me. Like I really have it in the same, like I am not the color red, you know. And so
Right. So yeah, just to that got 30,000 feet really fast. So let's paint a visual picture of that. So you have the experience of, if you're just sitting here, I have right now the slight buzz of you in my headphones, the little sort of white noise of that. A car just passed by over here. My girlfriend's in the other room on a call, and I can hear her a very small amount. And then like there's a slight breeze. I can feel a touch of air on my fingers. My right hand is cold for reasons I can't quite figure out. And all of that is just experience, right? That's just what it is to be me in this moment. And then, so those things, everybody would agree, are things that are existing outside your conscious experience. I don't have control over those things. I can probably shake my hand out and get rid of the colds, but by and large, those are things that are happening to me. And then there's what's happening in my head. There is, what am I going to ask Aella next? How am I going to frame this question? There's all those little bits and pieces, which in the context of just normal default operation, I feel like I'm in charge of this sentence and where this sentence goes. But when you get under that, when you get under the thought, you realize that you had very little control of where the thought came from. You can't originate a thought. You can't actually plant the core seed of it yourself. The thought just kind of comes in, and you either latch onto it or just let it swim on by, and it disappears. And so the initially noticing that the shelf life of a thought that I just let go is very, very short. It dissipates so quickly. Was sort of the first discovery there. And then latching onto a thought in and of itself wasn't really something I had any feeling of control over. Latching onto a thought would usually be aligned with something in the vein of just obsessing over something, right? So I had that conversation with that person 2 nights ago, and first I can't get it out of my head unless I really proactively distance myself from it, right? So once you start moving back, okay, sights and sounds isn't me, obviously. My thoughts aren't really me either. My control over the thoughts aren't really me. What the fuck is back there? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that a
It
fair
reminds me.
encapsulation of what you're going for?
Yeah, yeah, very much so. It reminds me sort of like the way you're talking about of my very first acid trip, where I did not understand the thing that you were saying.
Yeah.
And I had I didn't know any of this shit. I hadn't done a drug before. I was very rigid. And then I took the drug, I took LSD, and then I started having like this sense of like losing control. Like my sense of self was doing something really strange with the thoughts that I was having. And I was very interested in like knowing like, okay, I have this thought, I know what's going on, I have like sort of control and a sense of ownership and agency, and like I've got it. It was sort of like my claws were in my own head. And then it started like loosening it up, and I was like, okay, so if this thought isn't me, where is it? I need to find the control. And so I would like kind of go behind it and look, okay, I decided to think that thought, there we go, there's the control. And I'm like, wait, no. It's like holding a rope and slipping. It's like, fuck. No, where is it? It was really uncomfortable, but it was basically exactly that, except just like not consensual.
Yeah. Yeah, not consensual. Your brain just took it away from you, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, the edge of ego death it can be a dark place.
Mm-hmm. It's very uncomfortable. Yeah.
For exactly that reason. Your ego is not interested in dying.
Yeah.
Beyond the first ego death learning, as you sort of went through this 10-month, I mean, this is a show about trips, that one counts. Beyond that sort of first experience, did you find ultimately some core of discovery? I remember reading somewhere you had this feeling that, you know, at first you feel enlightened, this sense of being better than everyone, and at some point I think you talked about that feeling sort of walking out the door from you too, that feeling that you have stumbled on something that most people haven't, or you're operating from a higher plane. What was the sort of learning, visceral or academic, that led to going away from feeling like a guru, essentially?
Like looking, I use the term to sort of encapsulate something that like probably you have a good sense of. I don't really know how to explain it. Like this, I guess when you meditate, you know, you pay a lot of attention to sort of what's going on in your head. And if you look, you can see more. And if you look very, very hard, you start to see, there's a lot to see. It doesn't really stop.
Mm.
And so a lot of the journey was starting to look at myself. And when I started to look at myself, I started to have insight. And then I was like, I know things. Like, I figured something out that a lot of people around me seem to not have figured out. And this led to predictable reactions, such as feeling superior. And in some way, like that was valid. In some way, that was valid. And it's very exciting. But I mean, as I've said before, it's like, it feels like the thing that was happening is like I was this giant cluster, like my being and my beliefs and my predictions about the world, both the high and low. Like, for example, I predict, Donald Trump's not going to get reelected, and I also have a visceral sense, like if I drop this, it's going to fall,
right.
Or if something like falls over, like my brain is like doing like sort of very subtle predictions about how like physical objects interact with each other, like
sure.
childlike kind of things. So this is like a gigantic cluster of ways of like interpreting the world of pattern matching. And so when I first started doing LSD, it started like taking away chunks of that or making them object. I still had access to them, but they were no longer like, I no longer identified with them. Sure. And so something took a chunk away, and then I had to sort of figure out how to handle the rest of me that was still very intact, that had not been dead, had not been killed by the ego killing God. Had to like sort of make sense of it. And so this is, for example, like, I lost some ego. Now I have insights that you can lose ego. And the rest of me that's intact that I was not aware of because I hadn't looked at it yet, sort of reacted to this as being like, I have figured out something that you have not. And I was like engaging in the separation. Like, I as a person, this is an aspect of my identity and truth about me that is separate from you. And that was, again, like that was part of like what the structure that was still sort of figuring out how to deal with that. And so as I poured like more and more acid onto the structure and it's slowly melted away, eventually I sort of like realized that I looked at the part of me that believed that I was enlightened. And I realized that the belief that I was enlightened came out of like a sense of separation. It came out of a sense that I had properties. There was something that was me that was there to get enlightened. I had a sense of self, because if like, who is enlightened, right? Like, it's something you have to have some sort of sense of self in order to think anything about you. And so as I lost that, then I started to lose like a sense that I was anything at all, enlightened or otherwise. And then that's how that progression happened.
So the death of enlightenment was almost the final ego death.
I don't. That's an interesting thing to say, and I don't know the words I can find to respond to this. I don't think it was the final one, but like the farther down you get, the more strange things are. Like, one of the deeper ones was believing that the other people exist. That was I think that was lower down.
Hey everyone, before I completely let you loose in the world of ethereal metaphysics, this is about to get bizarre. I have to remind you of the evils of capitalism, which is that I need to eat, and really, honestly, I want other nice stuff in my life too. And I want to continue making these dumb things. In order for that to happen, you being a member would mean the world. The membership section comes chock full of all sorts of cool extra bonus content from this conversation and every other conversation on Baggage Claim. It also comes with bonus content from the more sound designed, hyper produced episodes of the show. I'd love for you to check those things out. Anyway, now we get to talk about the nature of self and psychedelics. Enjoy. See you there. Also, yeah, heybagageclaim.com/support and text member to 332-877-9540. Man, this is my laziest promo sequence ever. All right, go listen to the show. Goodbye.
like I'm gonna start saying things that sound like really insane, and I mean them very specifically. Like
No,
I'm not like making predictions of the world. So when I
yeah.
say I realize that nobody else exists, like I mean this in a way that probably would take a very long time to unpack for somebody who maybe is not familiar with this sort of thinking. Does that make sense? I don't know.
It makes sense. I'm deciding just based on time. I would love to hear that out, and I assume some very small percentage of our listeners are still tracking us right now. But I'm sure for those people, they want to hear it out too. If you have time, how
Yeah,
are we
I can
doing on time?
try. I
Yeah,
can try.
I'll,
Probably inadequately.
and you're starting to get to the ceiling of my ability to communicate eloquently in this space. So um, I will do my best to be a sounding board to keep you making sense. But
Thank you.
yeah, I may have you may have just gone like one atmosphere layer up from my ability to comprehend. So we'll see.
I mean, it's hard. It's like it's really it's like it's also kind of just whatever. It's like an enjoyable experience to look at, and if you don't want to look at it, for anybody listening, like that is absolutely
Yeah.
like awesome too. I respect not looking at things, but with the other people existing thing, it's like so you have this giant lattice of yourself made out of various predictions and preferences and beliefs that you hold. I usually use the term like prediction to sort of encompass all this. You have like predictions, like you like a models about who you are, and you start stripping them away. And one of these is the idea that there's a separation between you and others. And so people often have this. They take in like, oh, I feel like very connected. But at some point, like the feeling of connection with somebody else only exists if you think there is somebody else to be connected to. And so like it only is built upon like a fundamental model that you are separate. Like you cannot feel connected unless you're also separate. And so as I looked at the sense of connection I had with others, and then I realized that I was doing it. A lot of this comes out of like realizing that you are doing a thing. So for example, let's see, like becoming object use, like free will. Like you sort of think that you are like in control of something, and then you realize that like it is rising to you. But also in the letting go of free will, I sort of feel like I have free will over everything. Like it's either all or nothing. Like either everything, every piece of existence, every sensation I am responsible for and giving rise to, or for none of it. It's like this like the clock, like midnight, like flicking back and forth very quickly. Because it doesn't make sense to be responsible for one thing and not another. Is this, am I talking crazy talk? Is this
No,
conceivable?
I'm still with you. I'm still with you.
Okay. Right. And so you become like if you can look at a sensation for long enough, it dissolves. And if you look at a belief for long enough, you realize you are performing the belief. If you look at an object for long enough, you realize that you are like the perception of the object in your field of vision is something that you are creating.
Right.
And with this, when you look at the belief that there is somebody besides yourself, this also dissolves. This doesn't mean that I act as though I am the only thing that exists. But I realize that I am inside of that belief, like I am giving rise to it, and that I don't feel any attachment deeper to like this idea that there actually is someone else, you know?
Yeah. So is it the same? Is it an externalization of the belief that you exist dissipating as well, essentially?
I don't understand.
So is it, obviously ego death comes with the sort of understanding that this core version of you doesn't exist and that you're just experience. Is the recognition we're getting to the sort of visceral understanding of that being true for everybody and everything?
Well, to realize that everybody else and everything is you. Like it is a conception. It is something that is occurring in you. Like this, it is the sensation. Like the belief that other people exist, the experience of other people is also a sensation.
So what is the difference between being on my side of the mic and yours? Because
Uh,
obviously, if I have that same set of if I have that same realization set, say we're both like lights out on acid right now, and which honestly might sound to many as though we are, but but say we're both out of our minds right now, or very much in our minds, however you want to portray that. How, if we both make that realization at the same moment, not who is right, because that misses the point that you're making, but where is truth about our experience?
where is truth? What do you mean by truth?
Where if you come to the realization that I don't exist and I come to the realization that you don't exist, is there anything?
What what if you woke up right now and you're like, oh, Aella was a dream? Like,
It's be a fucking weird dream.
it would be a weird dream. Yeah, and it was a great dream. I'm really enjoying this. But like, also, if we woke up, or if you woke up, and this is a dream, and then you thought back on the question you'd asked me, and then you're like, okay, I'm gonna go back into that dream. How would I answer that question?
I think I'm gonna leave this dead air in the episode. Um. So so your perception is that the existence of others is as fleeting or self-created as the content of a dream.
Uh, in some fundamental way. Obviously, this is a very persistent dream, and
Right.
obviously, like I don't like think like that. You know, it's not like a
No, no,
conscious
no,
thing.
of course. I want to stay up here
But
with you. Don't feel free to skip the disclaimers.
okay, but it's like when you ask, like, how does the other person feel, and right, and so, and then I pay attention. When you ask me that question, I pay attention to my response, and my response is, oh, okay, I'm gonna model someone else. In here, I like construct like this like character. It's sort of like a reflection of me. I sort of like somebody who's doing the thing that is perception, and it's over here, and I am not perceiving. So I separate myself from this model. But if I'm paying attention to what I'm doing, I'm realizing that what I'm doing is witnessing this model, and that everything that is existing right now is this model that I've created of you. And then it's like, well, then where are you? And I'm like, this is you. You know, this is as far as it goes. I am the creation of you.
Yeah. Am I the creation of you?
Yeah.
So 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 that goes back to what is real, right? Is anything happening, or is this all a big ball of yarn that we think is a knot, but if we pull really hard, it's just a string? You know what
Is
I'm saying?
anything happening?
Is anything happening?
Is anything happening? Is it?
I don't know.
I think something's happening.
It's unclear to me if anything is happening. Like if say nothing is happening, then isn't everything happening? Then just this is the logical result of nothingness.
There's a lot happening right now. I can like it. So what is the question? If there's a lot happening,
Is anything happening? Because if you don't exist, I don't exist. Your creation of me is the only version of it that exists, and you don't exist. What what else is there?
I I still don't understand what exactly it is you're asking.
I'm not sure I do
What do you
either.
mean, what else is there? Are
I
you
mean,
saying if you are not here, what could there be that is not you?
Right. Well, it's not about me and you. It's about the canceling effect of both those realizations at once. So
Both those realizations.
so if you, again, like, go back to the acid trip where we're both out of our gourd and come to that same discovery about the other in the same moment. Where is perception? Is there any perception?
Well, can't you look at it in yourself? Just look at the perception. Like, look at yourself asking that question.
And get to what conclusion?
Well, another thing is like there is like some sort of fundamental wordlessness, because there's
The whole thing's ineffable at some level.
right, you have experience. Like, I am experiencing quite a lot. I could say something about the experience, such as like, I have a model, and then as I speak, what's happening is like I create sort of this concept that is meant to like sort of reflect the thing, as it is necessary. As soon as I describe the thing, it is a representation of the thing. They are separate. And so if you want an answer, any answer that can be like thought as a representation of the thing is not the thing. And so the truth is silence in some sort of crazy way. And so when you're asking the question, I want to know, what kind of answer are you looking for? Are you looking for the words that will make you feel like you've got it? Or are you looking for like a sensation? I don't understand.
Both, I think. I definitely, obviously, I don't think this conversation's gonna get me to the visceral kick of what you discovered in that moment. So, but as close as you can come to an academic sort of articulation of it would feel useful.
My body feels like it's on fire right now because I started paying attention. Sometimes it becomes
This is gonna be the weirdest podcast interview of all time.
It's just very silly. Like, this is like, I feel like I'm being tickled because I'm trying very hard to think about the correct words to explain about how the dream works to the dream, and it's just like, it's like really goofy. I feel like I'm playing a really fun game.
Fair.
But
Fair,
also it doesn't matter. Like,
yeah.
like, fuck it. If this isn't like, we don't have to view this as a dream.
Yeah.
Like, we don't have to view this at all. It's great to not be that in touch with what's going on.
What was you've written about it, but hearing it out loud, the experience of those 10 months sort of running their course, and you slowly retrieving some sense of normalcy is not the right phrasing, but some merging back onto the highway that we're all driving on.
Yeah.
Take me through that experience as best you can.
Well, I feel like okay. All right. I can do this.
By the way, this is like, we can.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's just like, it's just sometimes like it gets it like, having conversations like this sometimes like sort of changes like the way my perception works a little bit, and it starts like shortening the amount of time perception that I have, and now I'm trying to shift back to my normal brain where I have the ability to keep thoughts in my head for longer periods of time. Okay, so getting back on the highway, Yeah, I was pretty whacked out. I had difficulty functioning, or I was very present to a point where it was hard to remember the past or the future. And then I decided to stop doing acid when I realized that if I kept doing it, I was probably going to die because I was becoming so non-functional. I was at peace with everything, and I was like, and then I had one trip and like I followed the path and I was like, okay, so I'm becoming fine with everything, and what happens? And then what happens? And then I realized like, okay, I could be homeless, I could stop working, I'd be out on the street. Okay, sure, I'm fine with that. How will I eat? Well, I just won't eat. And then I was like, oh, I'm gonna die. And then when I realized I was gonna die, I was like, do I want to die? Like, am I ready? And I was, and also I was like, but look, why? Like, the point of this is not to stop being. The point is to be doing what I'm doing. And then I was like, okay, I will stop, and I'm gonna forget all this. And so I stopped, and then I tried really hard to forget. And it took a while. It took about the same amount of time, I think 10 months before I was like back to kind of normal, like similar to before. Obviously never ever went fully away, but by about 10 months in, I was able to keep conversations better than I was before. Like kind of the way, like how I had been before I started doing LSD. And I actively tried to like anti-meditate. Like anytime I started paying attention to my sensation, I was like, no, watch cartoon. No, don't. It felt like I often feel like a giant sphincter, is the image I have. And it feels like I have this like this opening through my body, and it feels like an eye or a pipe. And when I had done a lot of acid, it felt like it was just open all the time. I felt like a dilated pupil that was just like having the world rush into it. I was like, ah, and I was so vulnerable to everything. Like anything would make me cry, because I was just touched by it, or like angry, or I felt overwhelming love. But it's hard to function like that. And so I was just like trying to like get the sphincter down. Yeah. And like slowly over time, I could feel myself sort of like crusting closed, so like less passed through. Yeah. And then eventually it got small. And now I am normal. Now I don't have a giant pipe gaping open inside me.
How long ago was this?
5 years. I did it when I was 22 is when I did all the acid. And then I'm 29 now.
It was about the same time as the Turkey trip in France and all that?
Yeah, it was about a year after I stopped doing acid when I met the guy I went to Turkey. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And at that point you had returned to some semblance of like normal waking state. Yeah. Default mode network doing its thing.
Yeah. There's still a lot of integration. Like in hindsight, there was like a lot that I got out of the trips that didn't settle in until like a year or two after I finished doing acid. I would regularly, like have an insight during the day and be like, oh, that's what that meant from like a trip a while ago. So it took like a while, like good amount of time for it all to actually like settle in and for me to learn from it.
This is going to be the weirdest closing pivot ever.
All right, let's bring it.
Where we're just going to close. I've got no more questions. What okay. Aella, where can people find you? What are you doing that they should check out?
I don't know what I'm doing. What am I doing? I write on knowingless.com, KNOW knowing less. My Twitter is Aella_girl, AELLA_girl. And then from there you can find whatever you want. I also do porn, so be wary if you don't like that, or be excited if you do like that. Either one. It's pretty good. Yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. This is a blast.
Weird ass.
So weird.
I really like it though. It's really nice.
It was fun. That was Baggage Claim, travel stories no one tells. I'm Will Conway. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend. Mash the button, hit the bell, do the thing. Text member to 332-877-9540 or go to heybagageclaim.com/support. The membership costs whatever you want it to cost. $1, $1,000. It's totally up to you. I'd love to have you there. It'll be great to see you in the community. And that is all I have to say about that. Until next time.